Aloha, I'm Lyla Berg. Thank you for tuning in to Island Focus. The topic of our program today is what might be possible with education in a post-COVID world. We're recording this program again remotely from my home, so you can hear from education leaders about how we might redesign learning and teaching. Mahalo for joining us on Island Focus. With us today on Island Focus, I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Phil Bossert, who's the Executive Director for the Hawaiʻi Association of Independent Schools. So nice to see you again, Phil.
It's great to be back, Lyla.
You were on our show early on when this pandemic was challenging education. What have you learned, and where do you think we're going with this?
I would say 90% of our schools are back in session face-to-face. Took a long time to get there. There were a few that just never closed. They just kept on going, and the majority pivoted out and did the best they could for online learning, and then started slowly coming back at summer school and giving it a try. And then in August, about half of the schools started some on-campus learning, maybe staggered, some grades this day and other grades that day. Kamehameha has decided not to come back until, I think, after Christmas, but all the rest of them either back on campus full-time, or they're offering blended options, so students who want to stay home for some reason or another can learn from home, and the ones that want to be on campus can learn on campus.
So was the inclination of the schools to bring back the students on campus, even if it was a hybrid form, because of the recognition that kids need to be connected with each other, or was it more about habit?
Probably a little of both. I think the habit is mostly what the teachers didn't, even though they had to try this distance learning, and some of them were really good at it, most of them were still uncomfortable without being able to have the face-to-face contact. We did see, and many teachers reported, that students who had been so-so members of an in-classroom group were stellar online, and students who'd been the superstars in the classroom didn't do very well online. So we did learn that there are different learning modes to support different types of learners, and so maybe a lot of schools are saying, so how do we support going forward both types of learners?
And what have you heard from the schools that they're doing differently to address that?
So I know the schools that do have the technology are allowing students to stay home and learn from home. It's also the case that some of the schools are pursuing what's sort of come to be called episodic learning. So you say you're on campus for Monday, Wednesday, and you're at home Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or something like that. The other thing is, too, I think after a lot of teachers felt simply from the habit of being with the kids all day, they felt they needed to be on Zoom, online all day with the kids. I know my friend Nikki Tomita kept saying, don't just keep them on the screen all day, put them, give them a project and then turn off the screen, let them go do the project for 2 or 3 hours and then come back and share what they learned. I think episodic on an hour-by-hour basis and episodic on a day-by-day basis might stick, at least with some schools and some students.
How has the community, or how have groups of parents come together to support each other in this? Because it's hard with everybody home or not home.
Absolutely. And, a lot of parents really complained because they couldn't get rid of their kids 5 days a week so they could go to work. And that was a big issue, especially preschool kids. Parents with preschool kids. They wanted those preschools open again. We've seen 6 or 8 homeschool support centers pop up that have contacted us. They provide a place for kids to go when parents have to go to work. And maybe the kids are still going to school part of the time, and parents have organized this in their homes. So on Monday they go to Francine's house, and on Tuesday they go to Jack's house, and so on. Or they always go to Jack's house, and on Monday Francine is the supervisor, and on Tuesday it's Jack, and on Wednesday it's Phil. So
kind of like pop-up businesses, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they may continue to provide that type of service. Both DOE and HAIS opened in the fall down about 3% in student count. And I think a lot of those students have ended up in a homeschool support center.
Some parting words as we wrap up our conversation today on our own creativity, and trusting ourselves. And there's so much opportunity now for freedom, but it's a little scary.
I think we should listen to the teachers who did well in this transition and help all teachers continue to learn to do well in both environments. I think we also need to listen to the kids, how they experience this thing and how they think we could do it better.
You've just met Phil Bossert, Executive Director for the Hawaiʻi Association of Independent Schools. Mahalo for joining us. I'm here today on Island Focus with Esther Kainua, who is the Complex Area Superintendent for the Hilo Waiakea schools on the island of Hawaii. Mahalo for taking the time to be with us, Esther.
Thank you for having me.
This is months that we're going into a different format of education, learning, and teaching. Can you please share with us not just the lessons that you've learned, but where are we going now and how are you re-envisioning education on the island of Hawaii?
Out of necessity, when we move to distance learning, I think we're finding that actually will probably become a component of what we do naturally in every school, that it might be a subset or a model within our schools, given that, the pandemic is something we have to live with and we want to honor, families' needs in terms of keeping them safe. We have so many children from multi-generational homes or multi-family homes, and we have to honor that. I do see distance learning as becoming kind of a component of what we do at every level. And it is really for us to refine what that looks like. It really has to be much more integration, even working with the family, because for the first time now, we're in people's living rooms, in their kitchens, on the lanai, wherever it is. And it is, how do we integrate aspects of home within what we do every day?
And I know you have many stories, joyful stories of teachers exploring their own creative skills on how to integrate the arts, music.
I think about Hilo Intermediate School over the summer. They did a band concert that was like a drive-through band concert. So the kids there were tents all over the parking lot, and the kids were in sections, and parents could either come in and sit and watch or walk up. Everybody's socially distanced, but they just found a way to make it work. And that's continuing to happen now. One parent commented, I'd like to see what this all sounds like when it comes together, because she hears her kids practicing with their sections, but it'll be neat to see how that all comes together when they're all online. And thinking about even art, great teacher over at Waiakea Waina who does art with kids, and all they need is pencil and paper, and he walks them through. And we're not saying, because we can't say, oh, kids have access to watercolors, to acrylics, whatever. We want to make it really simple and show them that they're all artists, right? So we're just finding ways to work with minimally, the kinds of materials we would hope maybe they have. And if they don't, the schools have been great about donations. Our community has been great about donations of supplies and materials that they've always done, and like asking schools, what do you need from us to support those things? And having kids even just, we're going to all share something that we found around our home or in the yard, and having kids just like, wow, we can do show and tell, we can share just from what's there. And, even our high schoolers looking at solving issues in the community and having these virtual meetings, if it's a student government leaders coming together, how do we do this? We want to highlight, I think a fabulous thing Waikea High School is doing is they're highlighting a local business every week. They had J. Hara Store, they had Cupcakes Boom. Every week they're highlighting a local business on social media. The kids are doing interviews and sharing something about the business. And then the business is getting some promotion that way, which is so nice. And they're doing giveaways for families or for kids. So, it's just different ways that we can help out in the community. How can we support businesses in our community or other agencies in our community.
One of the concerns that the Board of Education had was in opening the schools and looking at that time frame was that the kids need the contact and the personal connection with teachers. It sounds like you have found ways that can happen even online.
We really just emphasized to everyone that we had to make sure we cared for kids. That was the bottom line, that this was a scary time to shift to we're going on spring break to we're not returning to school and we're at a safer at home order. How do we reassure them? How do we help them cope with that? Where do we give them outlets to talk about it? So our counselors had to shift their that way too. And we had counselors who created calming rooms virtually that kids could enter. And then teachers integrating into their everyday practice, like how are we going to do our brain gym activities before we get started for today? How are we going to do some mindfulness things? And then even just setting up Zoom times where kids can talk, because that's all they wanted, that contact with their peers. And it's fun because they'll have like 30 of them and they're talking over each other, but kids don't care. They don't mind. And they really need to say, they had to step aside and say, we got to give them that time for things that were happening on campus that are so much a part of their development socially, emotionally. And how do we do that now? So we're finding ways to do that and giving parents the tools as well and access to it through a school website. Here's videos that can support you as a parent at home if your child's struggling with something. Here are some open-ended questions you guys can talk about at dinner, just some sentence stems to get that conversation going at dinner and to really dig into how kids are feeling and helping and telling them it's okay.
As we wrap up our conversation, I really appreciate hearing how you have, in your complex schools, engaged everybody in the learning for children.
It's a community issue, and we have to work together as a community. Our kids, if we model for them as adults, mask wearing, the hand washing, the social distancing, they're bright. It's just part of the routine that we have to now be responsible for, right? That's part of education. It's always evolving, and this is just a different way it's changed. And so we do that for them, right? And we praise them, we correct. We want them to be successful in our community, and we want them to have the tools to be able to do that. So I think that's the one thing, is that we can never underestimate what our kids are capable of. And if we ask them, what works, I think that's been the other part too, is the surveys and what works during distance learning, what doesn't work for you, what do you want to see more of? We really have to listen to them because they have so much to provide. That's the insight we need.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us, Esther, and sharing some of the ideas that are possible in public education.
Thank you so much.
Mahalo for tuning into Island Focus today and joining me in meeting Esther Kainua, who is the Complex Area Superintendent for the Hilo Waiakea Schools on the island of Hawaii. Mahalo. Mahalo for tuning in to Island Focus and joining me in meeting PJ Four, who is the Interim Deputy Director for the Hawaii State Public Charter School Commission. Appreciate you being with us today, PJ.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
From the Charter School Commission's perspective, how are we moving forward with education in a new way?
The pandemic has forced change upon us in education. Not many of us like to have change forced upon us. However, as charter schools, one of the things we're good at is change. That was the genesis of charter schools. We're a public school, but we don't function as, say, the Department of Education or a complex. Each of our 37 schools are all independent agencies, state agencies. So they all have their own governing board and their own directors. And I think this COVID situation, this pandemic situation, has really, in some ways, created an opportunity for our schools to demonstrate their flexibleness and their ability to be adaptable to the various situations that have been thrust upon us, whether it be health issues or just remote locations, et cetera. I'm really proud to be associated with them as an authorizer of charter schools, and not as a complex area superintendent or something. But I'm really honored to have worked with them through this through this crisis, through this pandemic, and see where we go next.
What have you observed in the different schools that they've done to adjust themselves that might actually lead toward the future of their curriculum or the future of their teaching strategies?
One of the things I've observed, and charter schools have always pushed back at this, is as much as it may appear that charter schools are not, say, connected or have a lot of flexibility around things like standardized testing or state assessments or other measures like that, we are still connected and held to those standards at times. And this situation has given us an opportunity, because of the disruption that took place, to look at other forms of assessment. I mean, half our schools are Hawaiian medium or language schools. We have many of our schools that are place-based. The conversations we're having with our schools is, how do we take this opportunity to start to really highlight and develop and shine a light on the assessments of student learning and the teaching practices that we're trying to put in place and measure how our students are growing. So it's an opportunity, again, to really look at different measures, other measures, than just say putting a lot of weight on a standardized assessment.
Well, and I love to hear that, because even though you didn't use the word innovation, it is a very innovative way of looking at learning and what we're measuring.
Our education system is so heavily reliant upon content. And many of our schools are more about context. And how do we develop the skills, whether they be locally connected skills, whether they're connecting to the AINA or the community that they're a part of, and how do they bring their students in and then develop the skills that are either connected to what Hawaii represents culturally, or from a past, connecting with the roots of where Hawaii was and how we want to bring it more prevalent into where we are now. How do we share who we are? How do we present, this is who we are and this is why it's relevant and important? Communication skills, writing skills, presentation skills, research skills. These are all things that our schools are starting to, they've been doing, but now we get an opportunity to show how it's benefiting our students.
And what I hear you saying also inherent in teaching the skills are the values of our island community, and the values that we take for granted perhaps, but that are so critical and necessary in the world right now.
Each of our schools has their own mission and vision. And many of their mission and visions are based upon the values of their local areas, their local communities, where they're centered. Being able to move away from, say, we're not going to be able to move away from it. We still have to have these standardized tests, but being able to direct more focus to what we value, what our schools value as it pertains to their mission and vision is certainly something that we're actually relishing and the schools are working hard at right now.
Well, thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us today. And maybe one parting thought?
One of the things our charter schools is able to do is really respond to what the needs of their kids are. The students bring so many different great ideas and energy, and now they're all over the place. Their ability to adapt and be flexible to what the needs of the students are and to listen. So they engage their students and find out where they're at. And our parents are very vocal as well. They engage with their governing boards. And so there's many discussions going on at a local level about how to bring students back in a safe manner. How do we meet the social emotional needs as well as the academic needs? One quick story, if I can. One of our schools, to get to the kids and to make sure their kids have what they need, put in place a mobile Wi-Fi service. And they took a van with mobile Wi-Fi hotspots, go to various areas in their community to help the kids who did not have access to Wi-Fi. That's the kind of adaptability that our schools are demonstrating, and it's all around listening to the kids and meeting the kids' needs.
Thank you for being with us today, PJ, and for sharing your enthusiasm about what's possible in education.
I love working with our schools. Thanks for having us today.
Mahalo for tuning in to Island Focus and getting to know PJ Four, who is the Interim Deputy Director for the Hawaii State Public Charter School Commission. Aloha. Today on Island Focus, you will enjoy meeting Erica LaCroix, who is the Vice President for Community Colleges. So good to see you again, Erica.
Thank you for having me.
Please share with us how the community colleges have moved in relation to the expectations and changes.
The middle of March hitting us so hard, so fast. We really had to pivot and change what we were doing to ensure the safety of all of our staff and our faculty, as well as all of our students and their families as well. So our faculty were amazing in being able to make that very quick change to utilize technology and looking at different ways to teach classes. I've watched them teach science labs with simulators online. It's truly amazing. And it was in such a quick moment of time we had to react to it that it's really becoming an opportunity for us to realize this type of learning for some people, really they can accelerate so much more. It makes twofold now what we can do for our community.
The acceleration is also with the teachers.
Exactly. Our faculty have done amazing things by learning new approaches using the methods that we have while still keeping students engaged. And the community colleges are unique where we have to do some things in person. You can't teach automotive. You can't teach aeronautics. That has to be face-to-face. And with all the safety precautions, they've gotten very innovative in the way that they're doing things in the classroom.
One of the areas that you are very strong in is the connection with public schools. How has that changed? How is it continuing?
Typically for the high school seniors, mid-March through summer for us is the most important time for us to reach out and be able to have touch points with them. And with COVID, that completely went away because we all had to close our doors. We put into place what we call the Next Steps program that was targeted for high school seniors. We had 1,500 enrolled that took summer career exploration courses. They received some college credit. They got career counseling, all for just being able to provide them the service. 80% of those students enrolled with us at one of the community colleges or one of our 4 years. So it was very successful and it helped us remain engaged with them.
That's so exciting for that generation coming up that's going into the workforce. But community colleges have always had the responsibility as well as the opportunity to work with the present workforce.
So I'll say a couple things about that are very exciting. We know we have a number of people that have had disruptions due to COVID, whether their hours were cut, they were completely furloughed or completely laid off. So we worked with the city and county of Honolulu because they had some larger pots of CARES funding. And we created a program where we intend to train 2,000 Oahu residents between now and December to reposition them in short-term training programs so they can look at a different career or a different field of where they were. And it's all kinds of programs. We have 9 different industries that folks can focus on. Healthcare, of course, always is important, education. So anyone can go to oahubacktowork.com and just register for those things. They're completely free.
As we redesign what the courses are for the workforce, you're actually redesigning the possibility in our economy.
We just received a $13 million Reimagine Workforce grant, and that's all privately funded. But we did a really great job. There were only 8 states that were awarded, so it's a very big grant for us. And it's over the course of several years, but it focuses on the pathway from the non-credit short-term training to apprenticeship type training into degree-seeking training. So it builds this huge pathway where people can exit at whatever point is fitting into their life at that moment.
You know, as we wrap up our conversation for today, what do you foresee relative to education, economy, and environment? What do you foresee for Hawaii?
I think as Hawaii rebounds, the economy won't be the same. We're going to focus on different areas. And for the community colleges, we are the ones that can swiftly act to put into place training programs for whatever is next on the horizon for us. So it gives us such mobility and the creativeness that COVID has made us become much more so than we were before, is just such opportunity to help the residents of Hawaii across all our islands.
So, parting message to the public.
Please look at the community colleges as an option, whether it be for you to do your first 2 years with your intention to transfer to another institution, or you want some short-term training, or you want to come into an apprenticeship program that's going to launch you into a whole new career. We're the place for you.
I love your positive spirit, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Mahalo for joining us on Island Focus and listening to Erica LaCroix, who is the Vice President of our community colleges here in Hawaii. Aloha. Mahalo for being with us today on Island Focus. I'm Lyla Berg. On behalf of the Island Focus crew and the entire staff at Ōlelo Community Media, aloha and malama pono. Take care of yourselves, and let's be kind to each other. See you soon.